So they tried to stick me with that aria music, but I wasn't going for it. But I wore a helmet. So I have an easy job today. I'm here to introduce somebody who needs no introduction. We all know Errol Louis, and we know his work. As much as any reporter since the late, great Gabe Pressman, Errol Louis has truly become the face of New York news. In addition to his nightly duties as an anchor of the must-see political news show Inside City Hall on New York One, Errol has moderated more debates between candidates for mayor, governor, senator, and yes, even president, not to mention council and legislative offices, than anyone in his business. If you turn on the TV in the morning to CNN, you'll frequently see him weighing in as a commentator on national political issues. He also writes a weekly column for the New York Daily News, where he offers a frank and no-nonsense approach to the city's toughest issues, from homelessness to the transit crisis. Errol not only practices journalism, but teaches in-depth courses on social policy, investigative reporting, and the craft of news gathering to a new generation of reporters at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. Like you, I love tuning in or reading about the latest social justice issue Errol is shining his spotlight on. Like last week's moving manifesto for what he called our common moral duty on the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. He doesn't shy away from challenging the powerful on TV or in print. He forces us to be transparent about the work we do and how we do it. He holds us all accountable when we profess our commitment to community development and revitalization. I'm sure this perspective was shaped during his time as a community organizer in Brooklyn, founding both a credit union and merchants association. CHPC is grateful that New York City has journalists like Errol. So today, please join me in recognizing the 2018 Insight Award honoree, journalist, organizer, teacher, and truth teller, Errol Louis.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I just thought he was going to talk about how good looking I am. Thank you very much for this award. It has been an inspiration just to be here, to see the other awardees, some of whom I have covered, all of whom I have followed and admired. And I want to thank CHPC very much for this award. I'd like to thank everyone here for your support of New York One News and for Inside City Hall. I should mention that we recently added 2 million households to our footprint through an arrangement with Altice. So please tell your friends and family and coworkers that Inside City Hall can now be seen in Nassau County, Suffolk County, Westchester, all on Channel 98. That's for people who have Optimum cable service. We're also on throughout New Jersey. I don't often get a chance to speak in person with a leadership group of this type that has the kind of depth and history and reach and vision of CHPC. So I am not going to throw away my shot. As Kirk mentioned, there's some history that has been weighing on my mind, and I wanted to share some thoughts about it with you and issue a challenge to you. This week marks the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which was passed into law as cities were literally burning just days after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. It is an ideal time, I think, to challenge the affordable housing community, to create affordable housing that will lessen racial segregation in New York rather than ignore it or, even worse, deepen it. A few days ago, thank you. A few days ago, I visited Memphis to report on the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. I brought my wife and son with me. I wanted to show my 12-year-old son history as it happened. We waited on a long line to enter the Lorraine Motel where King was killed. And as many of you know, it's been converted into the National Civil Rights Museum. It's got all kinds of exhibits about African American history, about the civil rights movement. You should absolutely visit it if you come anywhere near Memphis. And inside the museum, they had all of these materials and historic exhibits, including an authentic bus from Alabama in the 1950s of the kind that Rosa Parks famously refused to give up her seat on. They have a replica of the kind of jail cell that Dr. King was tossed into. But the exhibit that really knocked me for a loop, in the section of the Civil Rights Museum devoted to the practice of racial segregation, known as Jim Crow, they had a section that said Jim Crow Today, and they had right next to it a map of several cities, and one of them was New York City. And it showed the segregated housing patterns that we know about, live in, and rarely talk about. We are one of the most racially segregated cities in America. Black New Yorkers make up about 23% of the city's overall population, but are less than 5% of the population in 17 of our community boards. Latinos are 29% of the city, but make up less than 10% of the total in 10 community boards. And so the diversity that we see in the subways, in the parks, on the street, it's something of an illusion in many ways, because when you look at where people go home to at night, where we actually live, and that's what the map in the Civil Rights Museum does depict, under Jim Crow Today, it turns out that most of us live in neighborhoods that are either less than 10% black or less than 10% white. And that has a lot of different implications. According to the UCLA Civil Rights Project, our public schools are among the most segregated in the country, with 85% of black students and 75% of Latino students attending what are called intensely segregated schools, meaning less than 10% white. Now, this, in my opinion, should be a source of great distress, if not outright shame, for those of us who care about this city and are concerned about making it a more just city. Segregation makes a mockery of the administration's vision of creating the fairest big city in America. It also, by the way, distorts regional housing prices. Some of you know that better than I do. There's a reason that home prices are so high in our mostly white suburbs. And in fact, there are hard numbers from Chicago and Baltimore that show the effect of segregation on housing prices, and none of those effects are good. Fair and racially segregated do not belong in the same sentence, and they do not belong in our city. This did not happen by accident. Over many years, restrictive covenants prohibited homeowners from selling to buyers of a different race. Banks engaged in redlining, denying mortgages to people seeking to buy in certain neighborhoods. And as late as 1999, a court found that the New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA, was using special codes denoting housing projects to which only white families could be assigned. It was part of a racial steering policy that NYCHA acknowledged had been in place since the 1960s. So there are a couple of things that I think we need to do almost immediately that I hope you will join me in doing. I think we should start by requiring that the city government seriously undertake federal requirements to affirmatively further fair housing. For many of you, you know the phrase, and for many of us, it's just a box to check off in the course of the main goal of getting affordable housing. But it has to be more than just a box that gets checked off. It has to be part of a serious plan to desegregate our neighborhoods. In depositions for a current civil rights lawsuit against the city, there are high-ranking officials of the de Blasio administration who have acknowledged, and this is under oath, that the city has not made fair housing a priority and has no systematic plan to address segregation in its affordable housing plan. And that lawsuit, by the way, raises a related issue that I believe needs action, and I know half of you will argue with me about this, but I happen to be right. We have a politically popular practice of running affordable housing lotteries that give 50% preference to people who live in a particular community board. We know the politics of that. We know that it sounds, well, warm and fuzzy. It's something that you can always get agreement on. But right now, if two people of identical low incomes are applying for the same handful of affordable units, Preference will go to the applicant who arrived as recently as 90 days before the opening of the lottery for that building. The second applicant might live only a few blocks away, across a somewhat arbitrary line. That person might already have jobs, roots, and relatives in the area that stretch back decades, but they would arbitrarily be deemed not from the community and placed at a severe disadvantage in the lottery. The fair and logical method, in my opinion, would be to let any low-income eligible family from anywhere in the city apply for any new affordable housing. Instead of having one big lottery, however, right now we have 59 separate lotteries, which is a formula for maintaining segregated neighborhoods. I would also suggest it is long past time for our city council to pass a law that would require co-ops to issue a written statement of why they turn down applicants seeking to purchase units. At present, the city's 300,000 co-ops can reject would-be buyers without explanation, and that, of course, allows for whims and possibly unlawful bias to go unnoticed and indeed unpunished. For at least a decade, a bill that would apply fair housing requirements to co-ops has languished in one committee or another. Some years it gets reintroduced, some years it never gets reintroduced. It has never come up for a vote is the real point, and that has to change. So let me close by saying that as New York continues its great and historic commitment to building and preserving all kinds of affordable housing, the work that you all have done so well, I hope that you'll join me in pressing to make sure we create a city that is more affordable, more fair, and less divided than when we all started. I am all in on this issue. I hope you will be too. As we heard a little earlier from Nicole, you don't make serious change by toning it down. Thank you so much for listening.